Hands on the wheel. A black boy like you, I know you're hiding something in here. I know you're hiding something in here. I haven't done anything wrong. You have no right to search my car. Rights? You want to talk about rights? Out here, I am the law.
He swung the door open, reached under the passenger seat, and pulled out a small bag of white powder.
I told you so. Y'all are always the same.
Cuffed, his face impossibly calm. No panic, no begging. 3 cars drove past. Nobody stopped. But there's something this deputy didn't know. He wasn't the only one recording that night. And the man he just cuffed? He's not who Swanson thinks he is. Granton County, population 58,000. A mid-sized town in the American South where everybody waves at the gas station and nobody asks too many questions. Friday night football, church on Sunday, yard signs for local elections stuck in freshly mowed lawns. From the outside, it looks like any other town. Peaceful, ordinary. The kind of place people raise families and grow old without ever making the news. But Granton has a line running through it. Not on any map, but everyone who lives here knows exactly where it is. The west side is white. Newer developments, better roads, a Whole Foods that opened 2 years ago. The east side is black, about 31% of the county's population, and it looks the way neglect always looks. Slower ambulance response times, fewer streetlights, more patrol cars. And sitting at the center of it all is the Granton County Sheriff's Office. Walk inside, and the first thing you see is a portrait of Sheriff Roy Hutchins shaking hands with the governor. Big smile, firm grip. The kind of photo that says, "This man has friends in high places." Next to the portrait, a glass trophy case, but not the kind with football trophies. This one is filled with photographs of seized assets, cars, cash, a boat, each one labeled with a date and a dollar amount. Hutchins has run this office for 12 years, 3 elections, 3 wins. His campaign slogan, "Keeping Granton Safe." And on paper, he's done exactly that. Property crime is down, drug arrests are up. The numbers look great, but numbers can be built. And the man building them was Deputy Dale Swanson. 14 years on the force, decorated twice for drug interdiction. Swanson moved through Granton like he owned the place, and in some ways, he did. At the diner on 5th Street, he sat in the same booth every morning, holding court with other deputies, laughing loud enough for the whole room to hear. On one particular morning, Swanson leaned back and said to the deputy sitting across from him, "Had another one last night. Pulled this kid over on Route 9. You should have seen his face when I found the bag." Classic. He laughed. The deputy across from him, a 27-year-old named Colton Briggs, didn't laugh. He shifted in his seat, looked at his coffee, said nothing. Remember Briggs. He matters later. Now, talk to the folks on the east side, and you hear a very different version of Dale Swanson. Traffic stops that lasted 45 minutes for no reason. Cars torn apart and never put back together. Bags of drugs that appeared in vehicles like magic, always after Swanson had been near them. Complaints were filed. Every single one was dismissed. And then there was Byron Carter. Byron moved to Granton 8 months before that night on Ridgemont Road. Told people he was a compliance consultant, which is the kind of job title that makes your eyes glaze over, and that's exactly the point. Nobody asked follow-up questions. He rented a small apartment on the east side, drove a 2019 Honda Accord with an air freshener dangling from the mirror, went to church on Sundays, helped his neighbor carry groceries up the stairs. That neighbor was Tamara Wells, 29, a nurse at Granton Memorial, the kind of person who remembers your birthday and brings soup when you're sick. One evening, leaning on the railing outside their building, she told Byron, "You're too nice for this town, seriously. This place eats nice people." Byron smiled. "Maybe I'm tougher than I look." She laughed it off. But that line, remember it, because Tamara carried something heavy. Her younger brother, Jalen Wells, had been arrested 2 years earlier by Deputy Dale Swanson. Routine traffic stop. A bag of methamphetamine supposedly found under the passenger seat. Jalen swore on everything he loved that it wasn't his. Didn't matter. He took a plea deal. 3 years. He was still inside. One night, sitting in her kitchen with the lights low, Tamara told Byron, "They ruined his life over something he didn't do. And nobody cared. Nobody." Byron was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Somebody cares, Tamara." She didn't know what he meant. Not yet. But if you're watching this for the second time, you already do. It was a Thursday evening in October when Swanson's cruiser pulled out of the station at dusk. He adjusted his mirror, checked his phone, and turned east. He didn't know where that night was going to take him. He didn't know about the Honda Accord waiting on Ridgemont Road, and he definitely didn't know who was listening. What happened next took less than 20 minutes, but it would take 11 months to build, and it would dismantle a career, a department, and a lie that Granton County had been telling itself for a very long time. Now let me take you to that night. October 12th, 9:38 p.m. Ridgemont Road. Byron Carter was driving home. Late grocery run, nothing unusual. The road was empty, just his headlights cutting through the dark and the low hum of the engine. Then, in his rearview mirror, red and blue. He didn't panic. He signaled, pulled to the shoulder, put the car in park, hands at 10 and 2, window down. Every black man in America has rehearsed this moment. Not because they've done something wrong, but because they know what can happen if the wrong officer decides they have. The cruiser sat behind him, lights spinning, engine idling. For 2 full minutes, nothing happened. No one approached, no voice on a loudspeaker, just the weight of red and blue bouncing off the trees. 2 minutes might not sound like much, but when you're sitting alone on a dark road with a cop behind you and your hands on the steering wheel and your heart in your throat, 2 minutes is a lifetime. And that wait? It's not an accident. It's a tactic. Let the driver sweat. Let the fear do the work before the conversation even starts. Then the door opened. Swanson walked to the driver's side. Slow, deliberate. His flashlight hit Byron's face like a spotlight. His other hand rested on his holster. Not gripping, just resting. A reminder. "License and registration." Byron kept his voice even. "Yes, sir. May I ask why I was pulled over?" Swanson didn't blink. "License and registration." Byron reached for the glove box, slowly, the way you move when you know one wrong twitch could change your life. Swanson tensed. Slow. Real slow. He handed over the documents. Swanson took them without a word, walked back to his cruiser, and ran the plates. The dashcam, his own dashcam, captured all of it. Every second. Every angle. But that dashcam wasn't the only thing recording. And that part of the story? We'll get there. Swanson came back, leaned against the window frame like he was settling in for a chat. "Byron Carter, you're not from around here." "I moved here 8 months ago. Is there a problem with my registration?" Swanson sniffed. Not a real sniff, a performance. Theatrical, exaggerated. The kind of sniff a man does when he's already decided what he's going to find. "I'm detecting an odor of marijuana coming from your vehicle. I'm going to need you to step out." The odor of marijuana. 4 words that have launched 1,000 unconstitutional searches across this country. It's unverifiable. You can't measure a smell. You can't challenge a smell. You can't cross-examine a smell on the witness stand. It's a magic phrase, and Swanson used it the way he always did, as a key to open any door he wanted. Byron stepped out, hands visible, no sudden movements. He stood where Swanson pointed, at the rear of the vehicle, facing away from the car. Now watch what happens next. It takes 45 seconds. Swanson walked to the passenger side, opened the door, leaned in. His body blocked most of the dashcam's view, most, but not all. If you look carefully, you can see his right hand reach into his duty jacket, then down, beneath the passenger seat. When he pulled back, he was holding a small Ziploc bag, white powder. He held it up with a gloved hand like a trophy. "Well, well, what do we have here, Mr. Carter?" Byron's voice didn't waver. "That is not mine." Swanson smiled, the kind of smile that says he's heard those words 100 times and they've never mattered once. "They all say that." 15 feet away, Deputy Colton Briggs stood by the cruiser. He watched Swanson hold up the bag. He looked at Byron. Then he looked at the ground. He didn't say a word. Not then. Not when Swanson called it in. Not when the handcuffs came out. Silence, in moments like this, is its own kind of verdict. And Briggs had just delivered his. Swanson walked Byron to the cruiser, snapped the cuffs on, then leaned in close enough that the dashcam barely picked it up, and whispered, "Compliance consultant, huh? Maybe you should have been more compliant." He laughed at his own joke. Byron said nothing. At 9:58 p.m., Byron Carter was placed in the back of the cruiser. The charge? Possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. A felony. If convicted, 5 to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. His car was impounded. His grocery bags sat on the back seat. Milk, bread, eggs. Groceries for a man who planned to go home, eat dinner, and watch the news. Instead, he was staring at the back of a cage in a squad car. On the ride to the county jail, Swanson made one phone call. To this station. And this is from the dashcam audio. His exact words. "Got another East Side pickup. Easy one." Another. Easy. East Side. 3 words. Casual as ordering coffee. But those 3 words told a story that Swanson didn't realize he was writing. A story of pattern, of targeting, of a system that had been operating in the dark for years. And the word another, that single word, meant Byron wasn't the first. He was just the latest. From the back seat, Byron spoke quietly. "Deputy, I want to make sure I understand the charges." Swanson didn't turn around. "You'll understand them when the judge reads them." At 10:31 p.m., Byron Carter was booked into the Granton County Jail, photographed, fingerprinted, stripped of his clothes, and handed an orange jumpsuit, his wallet, his keys, his phone, all placed in a clear plastic bag and labeled with a number, inmate 20241012-0834. Bond, $50,000. For a bag of powder that was never his. He was allowed one phone call. He picked up the receiver, dialed, spoke for less than 90 seconds. His face showed nothing. No fear, no anger, no desperation. Just stillness. Who did he call? What did he say? Hold that question. Byron spent that night in a 6x8 cell. No window. A metal toilet bolted to the wall. A thin wool blanket that smelled like bleach and regret. He sat on the metal bench. He didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, counted the cracks. But here's the thing, and this matters. He wasn't awake because he was afraid. He wasn't running through worst-case scenarios. He wasn't panicking about his future. He was waiting. And if you don't understand what that means yet, you will. The next morning, the machine started grinding. Byron was transferred from the holding cell to a processing area. Fluorescent lights, concrete walls, a plastic chair bolted to the floor. He was handed a business card, a public defender. The attorney showed up 40 minutes later, sat down across from him, and opened a manila folder so thick it was falling apart. Not thick with Byron's case, thick with everyone else's. This man had 43 active cases, 43 names, 43 lives, and not enough hours in the day for any of them. He scanned Byron's file for about 2 minutes. Then he looked up. Felony possession, first offense. My recommendation? We negotiate a plea. Probably get it down to 18 months, maybe less with good behavior. Byron stared at him. You're not going to ask me if I did it. The attorney blinked like the question hadn't occurred to him. Mr. Carter, what I'd recommend is that we focus on the best possible outcome given the charges. 4 minutes. That was the entire meeting. 4 minutes, and a man who'd never touched drugs in his life was being coached to plead guilty. That's what justice looked like in Granson County. Not a fight, not an investigation, a negotiation. And the negotiation started from the assumption that you were already guilty. Meanwhile, across town, Tamara Wells got a phone call from a neighbor. She didn't even grab her coat. She drove to the jail with her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the wheel. At the visitation window, separated by scratched plexiglass and a phone receiver that smelled like 100 desperate conversations, Tamara looked at Byron, and her voice broke. Byron, what happened? He kept his voice low, steady. Swanson pulled me over. Said he found something in my car. The color drained from her face. She pressed her hand against the glass. No, not again. This is exactly what they did to Jalen. This is the exact same thing. Her tears came fast. She wasn't just crying for Byron. She was reliving the worst day of her brother's life. The same deputy, the same lie, the same result. Myron leaned forward until his forehead was almost touching the glass. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Tamara, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She didn't understand what he meant. The words didn't match the situation. A man in an orange jumpsuit behind bulletproof glass asking for trust. That's not how this works. But something in his eyes, a steadiness, a certainty that had no business being there, made her nod. She didn't know why. She just did. Back at the sheriff's office, Swanson was having a great morning. Coffee in hand, feet up. He was typing his incident report with the easy rhythm of a man who'd done this dozens of times. Upon conducting a lawful traffic stop on Ridgemont Road at approximately 9:42 p.m., this deputy detected the odor of marijuana emanating from the vehicle. A subsequent search revealed a clear plastic bag containing a white, powdery substance consistent with cocaine, located beneath the front passenger seat. 600 words. Clean. Professional. Filed at 8:15 a.m., between his second cup of coffee and a joke he cracked to Briggs about the Cowboys game. A man's life, reduced to paperwork and submitted with less thought than a lunch order. Later that morning, Byron stood before a judge. The prosecutor asked for high bail, given the severity of the charge and the defendant's recent relocation to the area. The public defender offered a half-hearted objection that lasted maybe 10 seconds. The judge barely looked up. Bond is set at $50,000. Next case. Next case. 2 words. That's how fast a life gets processed in a courtroom that sees too many cases and asks too few questions. And $50,000? Byron Carter, compliance consultant, apartment renter, Honda Accord driver, didn't have it. Or rather, that version of Byron Carter didn't have it. Because that's who everyone in that courtroom thought he was. A man with a modest life and no one in his corner. Word spread through the East Side by noon. Another arrest. Another black man. Another bag that materialized from thin air. The barber shop on Grant Street became an informal courthouse. Chairs pulled in a circle, the TV muted, voices low and angry. Elders who'd lived through 40 years of this, young men who'd been stopped themselves. They all believed Byron, every single one. And not one of them believed it would make a difference. An old man in the corner chair, the one who's been coming to that barber shop since before most of the others were born, said it plainly. "I've been here 40 years. They plant it, they charge you, you take the deal. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Nobody argued with him, because he was right. That is how it worked. Every single time. But 60 miles from Granton, in a federal office building with no sign on the door and no name on the directory, a woman's hand placed a printed photograph on a conference table. The photograph showed Swanson's cruiser parked behind Byron's Honda on Ridgemont Road, but not from the dashcam angle, from above. A completely different angle. An angle that shouldn't exist unless someone else was there that night. The woman picked up the phone and said 5 words. "He made the stop. Confirmed." And that's when this story stops being about one bad cop on a dark road and starts being about something much, much bigger. Now let me take you somewhere you weren't expecting. 60 miles from Granton, a federal office building. No sign out front, no name in the lobby directory, just a plain gray door on the 4th floor with a keycard reader and a small camera above the frame. Behind that door, a conference room, and on the far wall, a map of Granton County covered in photographs, pins, and red string. At the center of the web, one face. Deputy Dale Swanson's department photo, clean-shaven, badge polished, looking straight into the camera like a man who believes he'll never answer for anything. Around his photo, 9 others. 9 faces. All black men. All from the East Side. All arrested on drug charges following traffic stops conducted by Dale Swanson over the past 2 years. 9 separate stops. 9 bags that appeared from nowhere. 9 lives derailed. This is the FBI's Public Corruption Unit Southern District Field Office. And the woman standing in front of that wall? The same woman who placed the photograph on the table. The same woman who made the phone call. Is Senior Special Agent Denise Thornton. For 11 months, Thornton and a team of 6 federal investigators had been running an operation called Clean Corridor. Its target? Systemic evidence planting and civil rights violations within the Granton County Sheriff's Office. 11 months of surveillance, 11 months of wiretaps, 11 months of building a case so airtight that no lawyer, no judge, no political connection could pry it open. And now, the part that changes everything. Agent Thornton opened a file folder on the conference table. Inside, a photograph of Byron Carter. But not the booking photo, not the mugshot with the inmate number across the bottom. A different photo entirely. Byron Carter in a dark suit, standing in a wood-paneled office, shaking hands with a Deputy Attorney General of the United States. Next to the photo, a badge. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. Byron Carter is not a compliance consultant. He is an embedded federal investigator with the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, assigned to Operation Clean Corridor as the primary field operative. His mission? Relocate to Granton, build a civilian identity, blend in, and wait. Wait for Deputy Dale Swanson to do what Dale Swanson always does. Target a black man on a dark road and plant evidence in his car. On October 12th at 9:42 p.m. on Ridgemont Road, that's exactly what happened. And the federal government recorded every single second of it. Thornton picked up the phone and called Assistant U.S. Attorney Elaine Foster. Her words were precise. "He planted the substance. We have it from 3 angles. Audio is clean. Carter is secure. It's time." 3 angles. The dashcam, Swanson's own dashcam, the one he thought was his only audience. A concealed body camera worn by Byron himself, federal issue, pinhole lens sewn into the collar of his polo shirt. And a surveillance vehicle parked 200 yards down Ridgemont Road with a long-range camera that captured the entire stop from an elevated position. 3 angles, 3 recordings. 0 ambiguity. Now, I need you to go back with me, just for a moment, because everything you watched before this point just changed. Remember when Byron told Tamara, "Somebody cares, Tamara"? He wasn't being kind. He wasn't offering empty comfort. He was telling her the truth, the literal truth. He was in Granton because of her brother, Jalen, because of the 9 others, because somebody in a federal office read those dismissed complaints and decided that the people on the east side of Granton County deserved someone who would actually listen. Remember his calm during the traffic stop? The hands at 10 and 2, the measured voice, the way he didn't flinch when Swanson shined that flashlight in his face. That wasn't the calm of a scared man trying to survive. That was operational discipline. He'd trained for that moment. He'd rehearsed it. He knew exactly what Swanson was going to do, because Swanson had done it 9 times before. Remember the one phone call from jail? 90 seconds, face unreadable? He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call a friend. He called Agent Thornton. And what he said was something close to, "Stop confirmed, evidence planted, proceeding as planned." And remember when I told you he didn't sleep that night in the holding cell? When I said he wasn't afraid, he was waiting? Now you understand what he was waiting for. The trap was never for Byron Carter. Byron Carter was the trap. And Dale Swanson, the man who thought he was the hunter, who thought he was untouchable, who looked at a black man on a dark road and saw nothing but an easy target, walked right into it. The warrants were signed the following morning. Thornton closed the file, looked across the table at her team, 6 people who had spent the better part of a year building this case in silence. She said, 11 months, 9 families, and 1 deputy who thought no one was watching. She paused. He was wrong. So let me ask you something. When you watched that traffic stop, when you heard Swanson say those words, when you saw Byron standing in an orange jumpsuit behind plexiglass, what did you feel? Anger? Helplessness? Like the system was broken and nothing would ever fix it? Now flip it. Because Byron was never helpless, not for 1 second. The system, the real system, the one designed to protect civil rights, the one built by people like Thornton and Foster and Byron Carter, was working the entire time. Quietly, patiently, invisibly. You couldn't see it. The community couldn't see it. And Swanson sure as hell couldn't see it. But it was there, and it was watching. October 14th, 2 days after Byron's arrest. 5:58 a.m. The sky over Granton was still dark, that thin blue line between night and dawn when most of the town was still asleep. 3 unmarked black SUVs pulled into the parking lot of the Granton County Sheriff's Office. No sirens, no lights, just the quiet crunch of tires on gravel. The engines cut off in unison. Agent Denise Thornton stepped out of the lead vehicle. Dark suit, FBI windbreaker, a folder tucked under her arm. Behind her, 8 federal agents, some FBI, some DOJ, fanned out across the lot and took positions at every entrance. They moved like people who had rehearsed this, because they had. It was 6:02 a.m. The morning shift hadn't started. The coffee hadn't brewed. The lights in the break room were still off. And Dale Swanson had no idea that the ground beneath his entire career had already collapsed. At 6:18 a.m., Swanson's pickup truck pulled into the lot. He was early. He was always early. The kind of guy who liked to be the first one in, liked the feeling of owning the building before anyone else showed up. He parked in his usual spot, grabbed his travel mug, stepped out, and stopped. 3 black SUVs, federal plates, agents in windbreakers standing at the doors. His brain was still processing when Thornton walked toward him, badge out, voice clear.
Deputy Dale Swanson, I'm Senior Special Agent Denise Thornton, FBI Public Corruption Unit. You are under arrest for violation of federal civil rights statutes, deprivation of rights under color of law, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. She paused, let the words land. Turn around, please.
Swanson's mouth opened, closed. His eyes darted left, then right, scanning the lot like he was looking for someone to step in, someone to tell him this was a mistake. Nobody moved. A handful of deputies had arrived by then. They stood at a distance, frozen, watching their colleague get arrested in the same parking lot where they drank coffee and told jokes every morning. Among them, pale, jaw tight, staring at the pavement, was Colton Briggs. Swanson was cuffed at 6:19 a.m. with his own handcuffs. That detail wasn't lost on anyone. The same hands that had cuffed Byron Carter 2 nights earlier were now locked behind his own back, metal biting into his wrists, in front of the building where he'd spent 14 years believing he was untouchable. While Swanson was being read his rights in the parking lot, federal agents were already inside, warrants in hand. They hit 4 locations simultaneously: Swanson's personal locker, his patrol cruiser, his pickup truck, and the department's evidence storage room. What they found in Swanson's locker made even the seasoned agents pause. A secondary supply of Ziploc bags, 6 of them, pre-filled, some with cocaine, some with methamphetamine, some with marijuana. Each bag labeled on the back with a date. Some of those dates matched the exact dates of prior arrests. This wasn't a man who improvised. This was a man who kept inventory. He had a supply chain, a rotation, a schedule for ruining people's lives. One of the FBI technicians looked at the labeled bags and said to Thornton quietly, "He kept a schedule." Thornton didn't respond. She photographed the evidence and moved on. 4 hours later, Colton Briggs was sitting in a federal interview room. Gray walls, a metal table, a recording device with a blinking red light. Across from him sat Thornton and a second agent. Briggs had been offered a choice: cooperate or be charged as an accessory. He chose to talk. Briggs was 25 when he started riding with Swanson, fresh out of the academy, eager, nervous. He'd been told it was a good assignment: learn from a veteran, build your record, earn your stripes. Within 6 months, he'd witnessed 3 traffic stops where evidence appeared in vehicles that shouldn't have had it. Bags that materialized from nowhere. Suspects who looked genuinely confused. And Swanson, always calm, always smiling, always one step ahead. Briggs's voice cracked when he spoke. "I knew, okay? I knew something was wrong. The first time, I told myself maybe I was seeing things, maybe I missed something. The second time, I almost said something. I was sitting in the cruiser and I had my phone in my hand, and I almost called Internal Affairs. Almost. But I didn't. By the third time, I was in too deep. Swanson knew I'd seen it. He told me. He looked me dead in the eye and said, 'You saw what happened. You were there. You go down too.' So I shut up." He stopped, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I shut up, and I hated myself for it, every single day. The room was silent. Thornton let the silence sit. Then she asked one more question, the question that blew the case wide open. "Did Sheriff Hutchins know?" Briggs nodded, slowly. He knew. He had to know. Swanson didn't hide it. Hutchins called him productive, used that word in meetings. He approved the overtime, every hour of it, and the bonuses. Hutchins signed off on every one.
That testimony opened a second front. Federal investigators pulled the department's email servers. They found a message from Sheriff Roy Hutchins to his chief deputy, dated 14 months before Byron's arrest. The language was careful. Hutchins was a politician, after all, but the meaning was clear. The department's seizure numbers needed to stay strong heading into the budget cycle. Deputies who keep the pipeline flowing would be taken care of. Keep the pipeline flowing. That phrase, bureaucratic, bloodless, was the engine beneath everything. Beneath the traffic stops, beneath the planted bags, beneath Jaylen Wells sitting in a prison cell for a crime that never happened. Now, let me lay out what 11 months of federal investigation produced. Because this is where the story stops being emotional and starts being evidentiary. The footage. Side-by-side comparison. Swanson's dash cam on the left, federal surveillance camera on the right. Same moment, same timestamp. But the federal angle shows what the dash cam couldn't. Swanson's right hand reaching into his duty jacket, pulling out the Ziploc bag and sliding it beneath Byron's passenger seat. Clear as daylight. No ambiguity. No alternate interpretation. The wiretaps. 14 months of recorded phone calls on Swanson's personal cell. In one call, captured 3 months before Byron's arrest, Swanson told a friend about a previous stop. His exact words? Casual, almost bored. Found something for him. 4 words. Like he was talking about leaving a tip at a restaurant. The reports. 9 incident reports filed by Swanson over 2 years, placed side by side. The same phrases appeared in every single one. Detected the odor of marijuana. A search revealed a clear plastic bag, located beneath the front passenger seat. A forensic linguist brought in by the prosecution reviewed the reports and described them as copy-paste policing. Language so identical across separate incidents that the probability of it occurring naturally was, in her words, statistically negligible. The GPS data. A map of Swanson's patrol patterns over 24 months. Every discretionary stop color-coded, red for the east side, blue for the west. The visual was devastating. The east side was a wall of red. 84% of all discretionary stops were in predominantly black neighborhoods. The west side was almost empty. The money. A simple chart showing the correlation between Swanson's arrest numbers and his overtime compensation. Every spike in arrests corresponded to a spike in pay. He wasn't just planting evidence because he was racist, though he was. He was planting evidence because he was getting paid for it. And the man signing those checks was Roy Hutchins. Swanson was given the chance to cooperate, to name others, to explain the system. He sat in the federal interrogation room, his attorney beside him, and he refused. I was doing my job. I was keeping those streets safe. You people have no idea what it's like out there. Thornton didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly. You used that phrase, you people, on the dash cam, too. Interesting habit, Deputy. Swanson went quiet. His attorney whispered something. Swanson shook his head. He had nothing else to say. That afternoon, Byron Carter walked out of the federal building, not in an orange jumpsuit, not in handcuffs, in civilian clothes, with his DOJ credentials in his jacket pocket and his phone in his hand. He made one call. Tamara, it's me. I owe you an explanation, and I owe your brother something a lot bigger than that. The charges against Byron were formally vacated that day. His arrest record was expunged. But for Byron, this case was never about himself. It was about the 9 names on that wall. It was about Jaylen Wells. And it was about the next person Swanson would have targeted. The person who wouldn't have had a federal badge in their back pocket. The person who would have just been a person, standing on a dark road, alone. Back at the sheriff's office, Hutchins was sweating. Through the glass walls of his office, he could see federal agents carrying boxes of files out the front door. He made 3 phone calls: his attorney, his wife, and the local news station, in that order. His public statement, released that afternoon, read, "We are fully cooperating with federal authorities. The actions of one deputy do not reflect the values of this department." One deputy. As if the emails didn't exist, as if the overtime bonuses weren't signed with his name, as if "keep the pipeline flowing" were words someone else had written. That evening, on the east side, the barber shop on Grant Street was standing room only. The TV in the corner was tuned to the local news. The screen showed footage of Dale Swanson, hands cuffed behind his back, being led up the steps of the federal courthouse. The room went silent. Not the silence of shock, the silence of people watching something they'd waited a very long time to see. Then the elder, the old man in the corner chair, the one who'd said, "That's how it works, that's how it's always worked," stared at the screen. His hands were shaking. He said, quietly, almost to himself, 40 years. I've been saying it for 40 years. Nobody spoke, because the room understood something that words couldn't capture. This wasn't just relief. It wasn't celebration. It was grief. Decades of grief that had finally been given permission to surface. And that permission, as small as it was, changed the air in that room in a way that everyone who was there would remember for the rest of their lives. 3 weeks after Byron Carter's arrest, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District unsealed a 12-count federal indictment against Deputy Dale Swanson. Let that number sit for a second. 12 counts. Deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal civil rights violation that carries up to life imprisonment when bodily harm results. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, evidence tampering, filing false official reports. Each count tied to a specific victim. Each victim named, not suspect A, not complainant number 4. Named. Because names matter. Names are how the law says, "We see you, and what happened to you was real." Assistant U.S. Attorney Elaine Foster stood at the podium outside the federal courthouse, cameras flashing, microphones stacked in front of her, and delivered a statement that left no room for interpretation. This indictment is not about one traffic stop. It is about a pattern of conduct that systematically deprived American citizens of their constitutional rights, based on the color of their skin. The Department of Justice will not tolerate this. Not in Granton County. Not anywhere. The trial lasted 11 days. The evidence was overwhelming. 3 camera angles, 14 months of wiretaps, 9 matching incident reports, GPS data, financial records, and the testimony of Colton Briggs. Swanson's defense tried to frame him as a dedicated officer who occasionally cut corners. The jury didn't buy it, not for a second. Dale Swanson was convicted on 9 of 12 counts. The judge, a woman who had spent 22 years on the federal bench, delivered the sentence without emotion, but with precision. 18 years in federal prison. No possibility of early parole. His law enforcement certification? Permanently revoked. His pension? Forfeited. Every dollar, every year of service, gone. In her remarks, the judge said that Swanson had weaponized his badge against the very people he swore to protect. She said that the trust between law enforcement and the public is sacred, and that when an officer violates that trust deliberately, repeatedly, and with racial animus, the consequences must reflect the severity of the betrayal. 18 years. The same man who whispered, "Maybe you should have been more compliant," into Byron Carter's ear, the man who hummed to himself on the drive to booking, was led out of that courtroom in shackles. Sheriff Roy Hutchins didn't make it to trial. He was charged separately, conspiracy and official misconduct. 2 days after the indictment went public, he resigned. His attorney negotiated a plea deal: 4 years in federal prison and a lifetime ban from holding public office. No more campaigns, no more slogans, no more keeping Grantons safe. His portrait was removed from the lobby of the sheriff's office, and the trophy case? That glass display filled with photographs of seized cars and cash and boats, the one he'd built as a monument to his department's productivity, was dismantled, taken apart piece by piece, and carried out in cardboard boxes. The wall behind it was bare, just nail holes and dust outlines where the frames used to be. Colton Briggs cooperated fully. In exchange for his testimony, he was granted limited immunity. He was fired from the department, but he was not charged. He later enrolled in a social work program at a community college 2 counties over. Whether that's enough, whether years of silence followed by a single act of cooperation adds up to redemption, is a question this story doesn't pretend to answer. Some questions don't have clean endings, and that's okay. But this part does. 6 months after Swanson's conviction, Jaylen Wells' case was reviewed by the state appellate court. His conviction was vacated. Every charge dropped. The record expunged. On a Tuesday morning, the gates of the state correctional facility opened, and Jaylen Wells walked out. He'd served 2 years and 4 months of a 3-year sentence for a crime that never happened, for a bag that was never his. Tamara was there. She'd driven 2 hours before sunrise to be standing at that gate when it opened. She didn't say anything. She just held him. Byron was there too, standing a few steps back, hands in his pockets, watching a brother and sister hold each other in a parking lot on a Tuesday morning. Nobody said much. Some moments don't need words. In the wake of Operation Clean Corridor, the Granton County Sheriff's Office was placed under a federal consent decree, a mandatory restructuring overseen by the Department of Justice. The reforms were specific and binding: mandatory body cameras with tamper-proof storage for every deputy on every shift, an independent civilian oversight board with full subpoena power, DOJ certified bias training, not optional, not voluntary, required, quarterly audits of all traffic stop data broken down by race, and the elimination, permanent elimination, of arrest-based performance incentives. No more bonuses for numbers. No more rewards for keeping the pipeline flowing. Not just punishment, prevention. Not just consequences, change. Byron Carter stayed in Granton for 3 more months after the trial ended. He didn't have to. His assignment was over. The case was closed. The paperwork was filed. He could have packed his bags, turned in his apartment keys, and driven his Honda Accord back to Washington without looking in the rearview mirror. Nobody would have blamed him. But he stayed. He visited Jaylen, sat across from him at Tamara's kitchen table, and listened. Not as an agent, not as an investigator. Just as a man who wanted to hear what 2 years and 4 months in a cell does to a person when the reason for being there was a lie. He sat with Tamara on the steps of their apartment building, the way they used to, except now there were no secrets between them. And he went back to the barber shop on Grant Street. Not undercover this time, not playing a role. Just Byron. The elder, the old man in the corner chair, the one who'd been coming to that shop since before most of Granton was born, looked at him for a long time. Then he asked, "So who are you, really?" Byron didn't flash a badge, didn't give a title. He just said, "Just someone who believed you the first time." The elder was quiet. Then softly, "That's more than most." And he was right. It is more than most. But it doesn't have to be. 9 people. 9 lives that were bent and broken by a man with a badge and a bag of powder, and the arrogance to believe nobody was watching. 9 names that for years existed only in court records and plea agreements, and the memories of families who couldn't get anyone to listen. 9 records that now read one word: vacated. That word doesn't give back the time. It doesn't undo the nights in a cell, the jobs lost, the relationships strained, the trust shattered. But it means the system, the same system that crushed them, finally acknowledged what it did. And in Granton County, that had never happened before. This story didn't make national headlines. No celebrity posted about it. No hashtag trended. It happened the way most justice happens, quietly. In conference rooms and courtrooms and evidence lockers, carried by people who decided that doing the right thing mattered more than doing the easy thing. And this story isn't unique. Studies have documented that Black drivers are stopped at disproportionate rates across this country. Evidence planting, while difficult to prove, has been confirmed in multiple jurisdictions through body camera footage and federal investigations. The tools exist. The laws exist. What's often missing is the will. So here's my question, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. If you saw something wrong, not on a screen, not in a story, but right in front of you, happening to a real person, would you be the one who speaks up? Or would you be Briggs? Think about it. Really think about it. Because the difference between those two choices is the difference between a system that corrects itself and one that never does. If this story hit you, if it made you feel something, drop your answer below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about the moment the truth comes out. And I promise you, you don't want to miss the next one.
18 years, no parole, no pension. There's Swanson, done. But the thing that's got me is wasn't the verdict. It's what that old man in the barber shop. 40 years he had been telling anyone who listened. 40 years and nobody did a thing. Then Byron showed up, moved in, carried grocery, went to church, sat on the apartment step with Tamara, like he had nowhere to be. 8 months, pretending to be nobody, just so the truth could finally come out, like people got their records clear. But let's be real, no piece of paper give you back here in a cell for something you didn't do. That time is the gone. So what does this story really come down to? One thing, it's only take one person who refused to look away. Byron was that person. Thornton was that person. Even Rick, late, scared, imperfect, he eventually became that person too. And that's what I keep thinking about. Not whether the system is broken, we already know that. But when it's the moment, when saying something could do something, do you speak up or do you waste 40 years and hope someone else will? Tell me in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And stop right. Next week's story, the person who got caught was the last one anyone suspected. The truth doesn't stay buried. It's a weight